My name's Kate Kalthoff and welcome to a Stamping to Share video. Today I'm going to share with you how I cut paper. I have had a couple of customers request that I teach them how to cut paper on my videos. And so I'm just going to do a quick and simple tutorial on how I do that. And I do want to share with you, we're going to be kind of looking at these cards for our inspiration for cutting the paper. It's always good to start with the end in mind. So we'll pretend we're making these cards, and then you'll see that we have a long card that opens up the long way, and we have a tall card that looks like this opening up the tall way. And so I'll go over how I cut long and tall cards. And then I'm also going to share with you the rule of three, or the rule of thirds. It's a photography thing that I learned way back when I was in 4-H. And my girls have learned it, and we always use this as our guide, especially when it comes to putting embellishments and things like that onto our cards. So I'll share that with you, and then these are the papers that I've chosen to use. So let's look at the cutter. This is the Stampin' Up! Cutter. Now actually, I do use this when I'm going up to the cabin or someplace like that. I have a rather large heavy-duty cutter that I use for my everyday paper crafting. Especially because I cut so often for customers. However, this is a nice sized cutter from Stampin' Up! And one of the things that I love about it is that you don't even have to open up the extended arm to do most of your cuts, because it goes all the way up to 6 1/4 inches on the ruler up here. That's really handy. A lot of cutters only go to 5 or 5 1/2, so it's nice to have that little bit extra extension, so that allows you not to have to open up that arm all the time. However, if you are cutting larger papers and need additional measurements, they are available up to 14 1/2 inches. And so let's just look at a tall card. This is typically a card that people cut very often when making cards with 8 1/2 by 11 inch paper. And you can of course do a tall card this way too, so that your card stands like that. But today I'm just going to do the traditional way, so your tall card would open like this. And so what we have is a piece of real red paper, and it is 8 1/2 inches wide by 11 inches tall, and that's standard. So the first thing that I do with a tall card is I go ahead, and I'm going to get 2 cards out of this piece of paper, but I'm going to go ahead and put my score line in it first, because with one swoop our score line is done. So since we're doing a tall card, we need to score our paper exactly in a half, which would be at 4 1/4. Since the paper is 8 1/2 inches wide, we're going to score at 4 1/4. So I'm just lining up the paper at 4 1/4, and then the score blade is this lighter blade down here. It looks like this, and it's just a little ball on the bottom. So you just go like that, and that puts a nice score into your paper. Then you turn the paper so that you have the long side of the paper towards the top of your cutter, and this is going to be cut again. This is going to be actually cut now. We're not scoring. We're going to cut at 5 1/2 inches, because 11 inches divided by 2 is 5 1/2. So we just bring that to the top at the 5 1/2 inch mark, and then we can take our cutter and just bring that down, and now we have 2 tall cards just like that are scored and perfectly cut. So then we're ready to go ahead, and we can fold this up and start making our card. Now the next layer that you see is this pink layer, and so I'm going to show you how you can do another layer. So that would just be a 1/4 inch down on all sides. So typically what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll make 4 of these, since you'll get 4 of these panels out of one card. So I'll take my pink pirouette paper, and I want to cut a 1/2 inch off each edge. So I can just go ahead, and using my measurement over here, I can just bring it to the 1/2 inch mark, and I will just cut a 1/2 inch off the side, and then another 1/2 inch off on this side. And now we're ready to go ahead and make our inner panels. So then we're left with a piece of paper that's 10.5 inches long by 8 inches wide, and so we're just going to cut that in half. So this is going to be cut at 4 inches, and then we're going to cut it at 5.25 inches. And we can go ahead and do that to this piece as well. 5.25 inches. And we have our 4 panels that will fit snugly into the front face of our card. And you can see how those are just perfectly cut for the front face of our card. And then you can go on and continue to make your card. So that's how you cut basic tall cards with an insert, you know, a panel insert that's just 1/4 inch smaller all the way around. All right, so we're going to set that aside, and then let's look at the second card that I have. And this is what I call a long card. Now it could be a tall card if you stood it up like this, but typically when I make cards like this, I stand them like this, and I call it a long card. And so I'm going to use some basic black paper just like I have in this card. And we again are going to put our score line in first. But this time, because we're going to be folding it the long way, we want our score at 5.5 inches. So I just bring it up to 5.5. I take the lighter of the 2 tools, and this is the scoring one, so I'm just going to score that at 5.5 inches, and then I push that to the bottom of the cutter and keep it out of the way. Then I turn it so that I have the shorter side to the top, and I bring it to 4.25 inches, and then I just make my cut mark. And now I have a long card. So it looks like this. And again, to make our secondary piece, our panel that goes into the next section, I cut down 1/4 inch. So I can just measure on this right side and cut down 1/2 inch on this side and 1/2 inch on this side. And then when I make my 4 panels, I've got that 1/4 inch margin all the way around. So then this is cut at 5.5. And then again, we're going to cut this at 4. And we have a panel that fits neatly inside of our black card. So it looks like this, and you can see how perfectly that fits in there. Now on this particular card, we did even one more cut down. And so again, if you're going to cut another layer, usually a good measurement to go by is just bring it down 1/4 inch. So we have some typeset specialty paper here, and we're going to bring this in 1/4 inch all the way around on this vanilla panel. So we know that if this is 5.25 inches and this is 4 inches, we're going to need to make this 5 inches long by 3 3/4 inches tall, because again, we're just going to bring it in 1/4 inch. So we're going to bring this over to the 5 inch mark, and we're going to take our cut tool, bring that up, and then we're going to cut 3 3/4 right here. And then we have a panel that will fit right inside of this panel. So you can see how you can just keep going that way to just keep bringing your layers in. Doesn't that look great? So everything is nice and easily measured. And now I want to talk just a little bit about the rule of thirds. This is something I learned in photography class. And what I did is, just to kind of show you how this works, is I took a piece of vellum paper and divided it into 3 sections and another 3 sections going the other way. So it basically looks like a tic-tac-toe board. And what you can do is hold this over a card that you're working on, and this will help you decide where to put your embellishments. Now, a rule of third is it's always more pleasing to the eye when things are done in thirds. So you can see here we have the top third, the bottom third, and the inner third. So the inner third is kind of where the sentiment is, and then we have our embellishment down here in this lower quadrant. Another good place to put an embellishment would be here, or here, or here, anywhere where these lines intersect. And so you can see how nice that looks. Then we have this particular card, and again, we have our rule of thirds, so you kind of have something going on the upper 2/3 of the card, and then a little bit more space down here in the lower 1/3 of the card. And again, if you look where the embellishment is, if you center this white panel into this kind of tic-tac-toe grid, you will see that this heart ends up coming out right here where these lines intersect. And so that is true with a lot of good artwork. If you hold up something that has been divided into thirds that you can see through, you can see that a lot of times the accents are where these lines come together. And then oftentimes the card or the piece of artwork that you're looking at will be sectioned off loosely. Of course, you always leave artistic expression, but things are sectioned off loosely into thirds. So hopefully that helps you today with designing cards and with knowing how to cut cardstock. Hope you have a great day. If you're interested in placing an order for the Stampin' Up! Trimmer, I'll have a link on my website, which you can visit at www.stampingtoshare.com. Have a great day. I truly appreciate you. Bye-bye.